Stanford University.
Welcome to the seminar on People, Computers, and Design. I'm Terry Winograd, and nice to be here to get another year started. We've been doing this series for a number of years and really had a lot of great speakers come through, which we plan to continue this year. So glad to see you all here. Let me start with just a couple of minutes of administrative stuff for those of you who want to take it as a course. First, the most obvious thing to those who've been here before is we didn't start at 12:30. For years we've had that time, and for various reasons we decided to shift it. So I said, how about 12:45? And all of the announcements and websites and stuff that I put out said 12:45. And then it got sent to the registrar, who said 12:45 is not one of Stanford's class starting times, but 12:50 is. So due to Stanford's discrete schedule of class starting times, the official start time for this quarter, and we'll see it's an experiment, we may change it again next quarter, but certainly for all this quarter, is 12:50. So if those who showed up at 12:30 or are still tuning in from the video because they thought we were here before, sorry. But it is 12:50, and it'll still go to 2. Although I guess 2:05 is the official slot we're in now is 12:50 to 2:05. Okay, so that's our slot. The course is Computer Science 547, which is listed as seminar, Human-Computer Interaction Seminar. When we started doing this series almost 20 years ago, I called it Seminar on People, Computers, and Design because I liked getting people and design into the title. So I still call it that, and some of the mailing lists and some, you'll see PCD as an acronym. That's what that stands for, but it's all the same. HCI Seminar, PCD Seminar, etc. So sorry if that's confusing as well. Can you bring the camera down? So only a couple things you need to know. hci.stanford.edu/seminar will get you to the website. On that website you will find a complete listing of the speakers for the quarter, and for the ones for which we already have them, which is about 2/3 at this point, complete abstract and bio for the talk. And by another couple weeks I hope to fill in, we'll have all the bios. So you can go and look ahead of time and see what the talks are going to be. You can contact me. I'm Winograd at cs.stanford.edu. And there is a mailing list where at the beginning of every week we send out essentially what's on the abstract page. So if you look at the abstract page, the mailing list will not give you additional information. If you're like me and you forget to look at things, but when they hit your mailbox you do, you can subscribe, go to the regular Stanford list server and subscribe for PCD-seminar, which is the name of the list. And then you'll get these once a week. That's all we use it for. You won't get other spam. You'll just get a once-a-week mail, which is the abstract page from the website. If you want to take the course for credit, so I guess let me start the other side. You're welcome. We don't care if you're a Stanford student, if you're taking it for credit or whatever. Anybody who's interested in the topic is welcome to attend. Stanford students are welcome to take it for 1 unit of credit for the quarter, and that 1 unit does not have any homework, any tests, anything like that. Basically, you show up and you get your unit. And the basic rule we've set for that over time has evolved is if you are taking it as a remote student, SCPD student, watch it online. That's fine. Everything is broadcast online as it's done, and then it's there available during the quarter to go back and look at. If you are not, then if you want the credit, you have to come to at least 8 of the 10 sessions in person. So you can watch up to 2 of them offline if you're going to be away or something. It's not convenient, but we want to come to 8. If you need an exception to that, email me ahead of time. Right? But it can be discouraging for a speaker to get up and everybody's watching on TV. They don't even know it, and there's a bunch of empty chairs out here. Right? So that seems like a good compromise. At the end of the quarter, if you've signed all of the sheets, we'll pass around a sheet every day. Don't ignore. If you're not taking the course for credit, just ignore it. Nothing, you're putting your name on it will have no effect except confusing us. If you do want to take it for credit, then your signing it will let us know that you were here that day. If you just do that every day, you are done. If you miss and you watch one on video, or if you're not taking it in person, if you're a remote student, then at the end of the quarter, I'm going to ask you to send in just a statement under the honor code saying I watched everything. It seems silly to ask you to send a summary since you can get that from the abstract, right? So we have the honor code, and I'll believe you. So that's what you do to get credit for the course. Next week, I will introduce the course assistant who helps out with the mechanics, Ranjitha. She's actually finishing her internship at Adobe this week, so she isn't here. And Jesse, who's done it previous years, has been kind enough to help out. Any questions?
We have one other announcement. If you are currently on the internet, you need to get off. There's two reasons. One is so you can pay more attention to our great speaker today. The second one is so our great speaker today can get on the internet. All of these leases are in use. And so please turn off your wireless card if you're currently online.
I think it's the first time it's like those, please turn off your cell phones and pagers kind of announcements. That's the first one I've heard is turn off your wireless. Okay, next week's speaker, just to while we're getting set up here, is one of our own students who's graduating. He's just finishing his dissertation and is going to be teaching in Seattle, the University of Puget Sound, starting next year. Dave Akers, and his talk is about research that he did in conjunction with Google SketchUp and then with Adobe on using the record of when people do undos and backtracks to provide information that usability testing. So use that information to understand what's working and why, and how that compares to standard, put somebody in front of a glass window and all that kind of stuff. So next week, Dave Akers. How are we doing? This week, we have Lukas. I will start introducing you in hopes that we'll get on. Lukas Biewald, who, among other high qualifications, was a Stanford undergraduate and graduated here a few years ago, worked for various startups, including PowerSet. Some of you may know that did natural language and eventually sold to Microsoft. And he has started a company called Delores Labs, which is a crowdsourcing company. And his talk today will be on crowdsourcing.
Great timing. I think it.
Are we on?
Do I dare?
Oh, you need to wear mic.
Oh, okay.
Again, this is, I don't know, useful information for the speaker more than the audience. The mic, everybody says, oh, I can hear you. You don't need a mic. The mic's for the TV. Also, just in that line, there are mics. You see them hanging all over the ceiling. So when you ask questions, you'll just automatically get picked up.
That's exciting. So we got it. It's working. Thank you very much. So I'm Lukas Biewald. So I have a company called Delores Labs, and we take. Can I just ask, just to understand the audience, how many of you have heard of Mechanical Turk? Wow. Okay. And how many have actually used Mechanical Turk?
On which end?
Either end, actually. How many have used it as a worker? Anyone made some money? All right. How many have requested tasks? Okay, that's really helpful. Thanks. So I started the company Delores Labs to make it easier for businesses to use Mechanical Turk, and in particular to manage the quality of Mechanical Turk. So since then, I've tapped into a bunch of other similar labor forces. The talk today is somewhat about what we do, and also just in general about online work and this kind of Mechanical Turk-like systems where you have people doing really repetitive tasks for small amounts of time and kind of casual workforces. So this is one of my favorite graphs. So what this is a very small task that we put up on Mechanical Turk about a year ago. And the duration, you can see, is about 15 minutes. And each line here is a different worker that came in and did the task. So this line across the bottom is this first guy that came in and started doing the task. And then this is like the second guy. And it goes up to what, like about 45 different people that came in and did it. And you can see all these different people doing it in parallel, right? And you can see where there's a guy doing only two. There's like 2 dots, number 14 up there. You can see someone did it twice and then went away. And you can see some people do it for a little while and get bored and come back and do it. And where the dots are close together, you see people doing the task very efficiently. Where they're farther apart, you see them doing the task less efficiently. So this sort of gives you a picture into what happens when you put a task up into this workforce. So I thought it'd be fun to start with just some of the sort of interesting applications, more for fun than industry, that people and we have done with Mechanical Turk. This is one of the first things that we did when we started the company. We put up a task where it was, here's a color, just here's a block of color, and what would you call it? Right, so there's very little prompting. I mean, you could say this color is brown, you could say this color is lavender, you could say it's cerulean, whatever you like. And so people said lots of different stuff, like they'd say dark blue, they'd say purple, and then here's about 2% of our data, right, of the people that said this. And it was amazing. You know, it's like we got this done in an hour. It cost us about $20, and we have thousands and thousands and thousands of people putting in colors. And there's all kinds of interesting things you can do with that data set. So this is Martin Wattenberg at IBM Research took it and made this kind of a tag cloud. And I don't really love tag clouds, but this is actually a really cool tag cloud in that it's the size is actually how many people said it. So it's sort of like how canonical that color is, right? So like green is big, right? I mean, lots and lots of people said green. And then this is the average of all the different colors that people called green, right? And you can see like up at the top there's like purple, and you know, of the people on Mechanical Turk, people are more likely to say purple than violet, which you might or might not guess. And actually purple and violet are slightly different colors in our mind. So I thought this was one of the really compelling examples for me of how the things you can do at this kind of workforce where you can get small amounts of time from lots of people all at once. And this data set, we actually published it and made it available. And it was really interesting to see what other people did with it, right? So a student at CMU, I think, took it and made an application for colorblind people where they could mouse over a pixel and it would say not just, you know, what's the RGB of this, but, you know, you might call this color blue, or if you want to get detailed, you might call it cerulean, right? Something like that. So that's kind of one interesting application we did. Here's like another more survey-like application we did that that is kind of interesting. So this is asking that philosophical question of you have, I think it's like a trolley going down a train, some tracks, and you can pull a lever, and that's going to kill n people. But if you do nothing, you pull the lever, it kills one person, right? If you don't, then it kills n people. So you can save X number of people's lives, but you actively kill someone. This is the blue line of would you pull that lever at different numbers of people that you save. And you can see actually, it's interesting, these lines these green and red are different scenarios. I think red is like you harvest the organs from n people, or one person to save n people, right? You can see people are less comfortable with that. The green, I think, is like you push someone in front of the train. And what you can see is that actually, as you increase the number of people up to 1,000, people get, you know, are more and more willing to do it. You thought, well, maybe people wouldn't care, like 10, 1,000, what's the difference? But we found a difference, and I don't mean to say this is like this is like something you could publish in a scientific journal, but the fact that we could, you know, be having a beer and think like, I wonder what people would say, and then put this up and get the results back like this in an hour is just really interesting and compelling. And you know, somebody asked, well, what would happen if you had dogs instead of people? Would people be more likely to pull the lever or not? And I think this is the kind of experimentation that these kind of systems allow. I mean, you can actually have people as part of your iteration cycle. This is a little bit more serious thing that we did. So this is back when Obama and Clinton were in a primary. We took a month of news articles from ABC, CNN, Dig, Fox, and other venues, and we said to people, do you think that this news article is favorable to Obama or favorable to Clinton? And what we actually found was that people were publishing statistically significantly different amounts of Obama favorable news versus Clinton favorable news. And so like ABC in this period of a month was the only one that published more pro-Clinton articles than pro-Obama. Dig, you can see, is way out pro-Obama, which just a glance at the data would show you. This is something that a friend of mine, Aaron Coblin, did, where he actually he took that song Bicycle Built for Two, and he broke it down into pure pitches, and he would play that like beeping pitch and then have someone sing the pitch. And he actually had 2,000 people sing each of these pitches in this like massive like 2,000 part harmony where they didn't even know who they were singing with. And in fact, they didn't even, it's not even tuned, right? So people are way off pitch, but the average of the people is actually right on, and you can hear this song. And even some people are just not even singing. There's no quality control. I mean, some people don't even sing the pitch, but it's really interesting what this sounds like. I'd encourage you to go to his website and check it out. Here's something, this is like more of an industrial application. We actually did this for, or a customer did this, but they let me share the data with you guys. So this customer wanted to know what the Twitter sentiment was about different airlines. So people love to complain on Twitter about, like, man, my flight is late, or, I'm so mad at, Southwest or whatever. And they had scraped months of data from Twitter, and so here's a list. Can you guys read this? Yeah, so it's actually pretty amazing, right? I mean, like, Aloha and SkyWest there's so much more positive sentiment on Twitter than something like Northwest. And you can see actually the small carriers people are happier with than the bigger carriers. This is, and this kind of run takes us hours to do, as opposed to, like, 2 months of your intern's time going through all 100,000 tweets out there. This is our raciest example, also done by Martin Wattenberg. This is actually, we showed a picture of, we asked what gender are you and what gender are you into, right? And we said, okay, the gender that you are, here's a point on a body that represents you. How much would you like to be touched there? And then we showed a picture, a random point in a body of someone of the gender that they were interested in, and said, how much would you like to touch someone there? This is Martin Wattenberg, and so then he correlated.
We should point out that he's also the one who did the baby naming.
Yeah, the baby naming, yeah, exactly. So we actually collaborated on this one. It was a lot of fun, and it's. I thought that there might be some practical value in this study, but actually it's kind of I mean, the result is interesting. People tend to like to be touched where people like to touch them. So, I guess we evolved to be compatible. Okay, so those are, I just wanted to give you, it's hard for us to show the industrial applications that we do because the customers don't like us sharing data. But those are some of the things that should give you ideas of stuff you can do with this, this kind of thing. So online outsourcing is a growing industry. So this guy, Brent Fay, did a recent analysis of it. And it looks like close to $1 billion last year were spent at least through these online workforces that he identified. So big ones that you might have heard of, like Elance, is a place where a lot of people go to get websites made. Odesk is actually a faster growing version of that. Mechanical Turk actually will not tell you how much they paid out to their workers, but my belief is that they're a lot smaller than Rent-A-Coder or LiveOps. But this is also Brent's work. So he tried to find all the sites where people are doing sort of online work, and what he found is that over time there's been more and more websites popping up that do this kind of thing. And also, so here he has as the y-axis the size of the work, right? So big projects are up on the top, and then kind of the micro tasks, the really like is this sentiment positive or negative, are along the bottom. And you can see with the exception of Mechanical Turk, you don't start to see a lot of people doing the smaller tasks until more like 2006, 2007. And just from this analysis that he did, it looks like there's a trend from more complicated projects to smaller projects being done online. Here he has an access from kind of the volume of work to the price of work, right? So you sort of see there's sort of two spots, right? There's like the Amazon Mechanical Turk in the upper left, where you have really large scale small tasks, and then on the bottom right you have kind of one-off bigger tasks. It's interesting to look at. So when you think about these kind of online workplaces, they start to blur the line between work and play. It's not really clear what's going on. So this is a study another guy did of how much does pay versus fun affect how long it takes to get a task done. So I think this guy put this task on live work, which you can think of as very similar to Mechanical Turk. And so he had a fun job and a boring job, right? And so you can see when you have a fun job with high pay, it takes 3 minutes to get done, right? When you have a not fun job with low pay, it takes 7 hours to get done. So there's a really big disparity. It's interesting that his not fun jobs, even when he didn't pay, got eventually done by somebody. It's hard to know. But you can see it's like, measured in days instead of measured in minutes, how long it took a task to get done. So you can see that people are motivated by this interesting combination of fun and pay. Delores Labs integrates with a whole bunch of these different worker pools. And I thought it would be interesting to talk about the different pools that we work with. Or 3 of the pools that we work with. So Mechanical Turk, I'm sure you guys know the story of how many know the story of Mechanical Turk? Just the name story. Oh, you guys don't know it. It's cool. It's a super cool name. So the Mechanical Turk was actually this is a picture of it, right? So it looks like it's this thing made in, I think, the 8th to 1700s. And there's a robot that plays chess, right? So people would come and play chess with this robot, and they thought it was like AI. But in fact, there's a chess-playing midget inside of the box that was actually deciding where to move the pieces. And so the guy would open up the cabinet, and it would have that illusion where there's gears. And then there would, behind a mirror, there would be a midget. And actually, the chess player was very good. I actually saw, this is something people don't know, that Mechanical Turk actually played Napoleon. And you can find there's a chess database of games, you actually find that game. And Napoleon tries to do that 2-move mate, which I think is like, this is so funny, right? And then he actually gets destroyed by the Mechanical Turk. But the reason they named it this, right, is this idea of artificial intelligence, right? So that you take these tasks that a lot of us do, for AI stuff like, labeling what's in a photo or sentiment detection or topic detection. And instead of having a computer do it, you send it out to a workforce that does it in a computer-like way. So it seems like you're doing sort of like this remote, they talk about like remote procedure calls, they call it like a remote person call, right? It goes out and like gets someone to do it, and then they send the answer back to you. So who does it? I always had trouble really conveying who's actually out there doing these little tasks. And then my friend Andy Bio had a task where it just said, take a picture of yourself, right? So these are the people on Mechanical Turk. And he actually had them hold up a piece of paper for why do you Turk, but the resolution's too small to see it. But you can see, I Turk because I like to do varied things. I Turk for fun. The demographics are interesting. So this is a guy, Panos at NYU, did an interesting study of the demographics. And you can see that it skews a little bit female and it skews young. It might be surprising that it's about 75% seem to have bachelor's degree or higher education. And then the most interesting thing in the bottom right here is, it's probably hard to read, but it says, he asked the question, why do you do this work? And you can see that some people say for money, some people say for fun, some people say for money and fun. I've actually called up about 100 of these people and talked to them about why they do it. And I think a missing reason that he has is ESL people wanting to learn English. And then also people who have a really boring job, and while they're at their job, they can do they can make a little extra money, right? So you see a lot of like security guards that work on Mechanical Turk. A lot of grad students, actually. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you right now, if you're on your laptop, go to Mechanical Turk and you can make some money while you listen to me talk. Okay, so maybe you guys don't know, but Mechanical Turk, the average hourly wage is hard to measure, but it's definitely low, right? So people are making, on average, around $1 to $2 an hour. And the interesting thing is that, so this is self-reported income distribution, but a couple of people have done this study and they've all found this same result, that income distribution of people on Mechanical Turk actually mirrors the US income distribution pretty closely. So this isn't poor people, or it's not mostly poor people doing it to make money. So locations of the people is always interesting, right? So this is actually from IP addresses. So this is for tasks that we've done. So other people have different results, but I think these results are more accurate than other people's studies. And it shows you that it pretty much matches United States population. And then it's about 80% US. And recently we've seen a lot more people from India coming on, but I'm not exactly sure what's going on there. But we actually measured more people in the Philippines than India. So that's the Mechanical Turk workforce, and I think a lot of people know about it. So I thought it'd be interesting to talk about some of the other workforces that we tap into. So one place we go is actually casual games. So it's really interesting. So actually Facebook, so have you all played a Facebook game? No? Okay, so Facebook has this rich ecosystem of games, right? And a lot of the games have virtual currency that they make you want in the game, right? So, it's similar to World of Warcraft. There'll be a game like Mafia Wars, right? And people really want that money to like buy a bigger army in the Mafia Wars, or like buy a bigger weapon, or buy like a car or whatever. And there's actually this really rich set of advertisers that will give you money in the game, virtual money, if you do something outside of the game, right? So an example is Netflix gets a lot of their leads from these games. So you're playing a game and it says, okay, if you go to Netflix and sign up for a free 30-day trial, we'll give you like a better weapon in the game, or we'll give you money in the game. And actually, this is how a lot of these Facebook games make a lot of money. So we tap into that as though we're an advertiser, but instead of wanting your credit card, or instead of wanting some like information about your demographics, we actually want the neurons in your brain, right? So it's a little bit, it's similar but different, right? So this is actually a game. This is called Sports Bets, and you're in this game, and it says, complete these offers and earn chips, so you can do more fake betting on sports. And here's a list of tasks, right? So you can see there's like, go play a gambling game, or go, get a free trial of some shady diet supplement, right? or do a Delores Labs task, right? And so then you click on that, and you can see there's like a little layer of the Facebook app, and then there's our task all big. And so this, I think, was a task for an advertiser that wanted to classify web pages so they could show better targeted ads. And it's really interesting. People really like this model, and they're willing to spend hours in doing these kinds of tasks to earn virtual money in these games. And these games have incredible reach. So we can access like people in 100 countries just from putting this task into one advertiser that goes out to all these different games. So I think this is sort of like a new interesting model. And then I just talk about like a third place that we put these tasks that's like even like totally different, right? So this is Samasource, which is they're a not-for-profit that takes tasks and puts them in refugee camps, right? So people in refugee camps are not allowed to have jobs that compete with the local economy. But recently, they've been actually getting really good internet connectivity, but it's intermittent, right? So they've been trying to basically do kind of traditional outsourcing, but it's a little bit hard, right? Because they need someone to do outsourcing. You sort of need to have a guy in the United States who's managing the product, and you need to be able to say, listen, I'm going to be online from like 9 to 5. But in like the chaos of these refugee camps, it's hard to do that. So we take these exact same tasks, and we put the same like say what this website's about, and we put them in. And so this is somebody doing our task. This is a bunch of people doing our task in a refugee camp, a real task. And it's actually pretty amazing how well they do tasks that you might think would be culturally difficult, right? So like some of these tasks we put through, like choose the best image from a TV show. There's like looking at tweets and telling if it's positive or negative. Looking at if an image for a product is the right image for a product. So this is what our interface looks like. So there's like a kind of a big set of instructions. and then a set of questions. And you can see actually up on the top, we've actually put in some kind of gameplay elements. So there's assignments completed, and we have a leaderboard, and we have like levels that you go through. And it's sort of interesting to see how that leaderboard and level stuff is compelling for people that you might think are just there to make money. So I'm not trying to sell it. I mean, I am, obviously, right? But it's sort of interesting that this hasn't taken off more, right? So, if you're a customer, right, and you say you have, say you're like a social network and you have thousands of images being uploaded every day, and you want to know, is it a copyright violation or not? This is a better way to do it, right? I mean, these social networks will hire like 100 people to sit in a room all day saying, is this a copyright violation? Is this obscene? Yes, no. And it's like this horrible job. Nobody likes it. And then, one day you get popular, and now suddenly I have twice as many images. Or like, how do I do it in the middle of the night? This is the way that you can always have someone available to do it. For workers, it's better because you can sit in your house, you can turn on a computer, you can be like in lecture, right? And you're making money whenever you want. And there's no overhead of saying like, I'm going to commit to you that I'm going to spend the next week doing your project. It's like, I'm going to do it for 5 minutes. I'll get paid for this 5 minutes. OK, do I want to do it for another 5 minutes? And actually, call centers, I've learned how to switch the scripts of the calls people do just to keep people from going insane, right? And so, I mean, you can imagine the same script over and over, right? I mean, it's better to do different stuff, even though you get trained and get better, presumably, at one script. But this is a way that you can, this is like on like a bigger level, right? So like, 1 minute I'm looking at satellite photos and like labeling where the roads are. The next minute I'm looking at duplicates in an address book potentially. The next minute I'm like some crazy person wanted me to upload a picture of myself. There's like lots and lots of different tasks that people can do. And there's lots of big applications, but it still hasn't started. We still don't see a lot of mainstream businesses using this approach, and I think the reason is quality control, right? And so when I make it really easy for you to come in and do a task, and it's like it takes you 2 minutes to sign up, there's lots and lots and lots of fraud, right? If you're paying real money out to real people on the internet, you can imagine like how rampant the fraud is, right? So how do you manage that? And I thought it would be sort of interesting to show some of the stuff we do. So this is sort of some of the approaches that we've taken, and we've spent a lot of time sort of like thinking about how do we manage this quality. So one thing is what happens when you just hide in one result where you know what the answer is, right? So I have like the person do 10 questions, right? But one of the questions I know what the answer should be, and not surprisingly, you see this like big drop in error rate. So this is on like a benchmark suite of jobs we have. It goes from like 23% error rate down to like 8% error rate for one worker. And the really amazing thing about that is on one side, it's this thing of like you block the workers if they're doing a bad job, right? If somebody's missing too many of these questions, you kick them out, et cetera, right? But actually, most of that benefit is not from the algorithms improving. It's from the workers improving because they have this sense that I'm being watched. Does that make sense?
You tell them if there's one there,
Well, you tell them when they missed one. So you could say, okay, it's learning. I mean, that's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is like fear of somebody watching them. And what we used to do is we'd have people do a big set of them, and then we'd look for fraud retroactively, and we'd not pay people if there was too much fraud. And we would tell them that we were going to do that, right? And probably a lot of you using Mechanical Turk, the people that have used Mechanical Turk probably use that approach where you go in afterwards and you say, listen, we're not paying you because that was obviously fraudulent jobs. Sure.
Okay, so fraud basically is you get random answers.
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, I'll get into that a little more, but yeah. So say you're just trying to pull out the random answers, right? So we find that even if you warn people that I'm gonna punish you later by not paying you for all the work that you did, it's better to instantly tell them you got that one wrong, right? In fact, we can measure the error rate halves when you do that. When you give people immediate feedback as opposed to retroactively punishing them. And actually, now we pay everybody, right? So if you can finish our task without getting, so what happens is we actually increase the length of time that you have to sit and watch the thing telling you got the wrong answer. So each time you get it wrong, it doubles the amount of time they have to sit on that screen and look at the answer that you should have done. And you could now be fraudulent by just click one, wait, but people would rather do a good job and avoid that screen. And it also, the other thing that it does is it gives you better statistics on what answers you're confident about, right? So here we have a graph, and this confidence number should not be interpreted as a probability. It's just like a ranking on the results of how likely we think we are that we got the right answer for a customer. So taking that example of, is this image a copyright violation? This would be the confidence that it knew that it was a copyright violation or didn't know that it was a copyright violation. And then this is actually the empirical accuracy that we got in the task. And so you can see as the confidence value is higher, the empirical accuracy goes up. But when you have, when you've put in gold standard data that you use to figure out how good of a job the workers are doing, you get a better curve there. And then you can look at so you can look at how different workers will have different tendencies, right? So you'll find that like some workers sort of err on the side of being too permissive, and other workers might err. So maybe some people say yes too frequently, and some people say no too frequently. And you can actually use that to tune your answers to what somebody would want, right? So if you want to err on the side of I want to get rid of any image that might ever be a copyright violation, I can do that. Or if I want to err on the side of I only want to kick out images when I'm positive they're a copyright violation, I can do that by depending where I set a threshold. And this is sort of saying the same thing, right? It's like you have a decision threshold, and there's different levels of accuracy, but you might want to set it in different places depending on your false positive, false negative trade-off. So this is an ugly graph, but I apologize. But I think it's a really interesting graph that I just pulled right before this talk to say. So this is, let's just look at the black line here. And so what this is the quality of results that we got from workers and the amount of workers at that level of quality, right? So like this on the left would be the number of workers that are really bad. And then out on the right, it'd be the number of workers that are really, really good, right? So this is for like really like generally repetitive small tasks. And the interesting thing is like when I first started using Mechanical Turk, I thought this is going to be a really bimodal distribution, right? There's going to be this big like bump on the left and this big bump on the right. And we'll just, the bump on the left is the scammers, the bump on the right is the people taking the task seriously, and we'll just kick out the scammers and we'll have fine results because these tasks are so simple. And instead what we find is this much messier thing where it's kind of, it's sort of like normally distributed, right? And you have like, in the middle you have workers that, they mostly do a good job, but sometimes they make mistakes. On the left you have workers that make more mistakes than the average person. On the right you have like kind of superstars at like really repetitive labeling. And it's not clear what to do. It's like, where do you set that threshold where you're kicking people out? So that's a challenge that we've really faced with the system, and it's like regardless of task. You could have a job where it's like, is this block of color red, right? Yes or no, and like it would take you like half a second to do it correctly, and you'll have people that do it like 80% correct, and it's like, man, what are you doing? Like half the time you're like clearly looking at it more than random, right? You're better than random, but there's like this random injection of noise. So that's like the challenge of these systems, and I think that's another thing that we find is that people that are really careful tend to stay really careful, right? So we can use the fact that people come in, we can use the fact that we find the guy that's like really OCD, that's always doing a really good job, and we can encourage him to do more and more of our tasks. Well, so bots are easy, right? That's the point I'm trying to make with this graph is like bots are like, so if somebody's just completely uncorrelated. So the thing about bots is they're totally uncorrelated with what other people are doing. And if you find someone that's not correlated, so that's like basically as good as chance at getting the right answer, then it's really easy to just say that's a bot. Maybe I should step back a second. So the way we do this kind of analysis is every task that goes up, we have multiple people do it, right? So if we see so two good workers will generally be highly correlated, right? They'll typically be getting the same answer most of the time, right? If a bot comes in, they're going to be completely uncorrelated with everybody else, right? So when we look at the results, we'd be like, man, this is like random noise. They get kicked out. The tricky thing, and so I was expecting it's like bots versus non-bots, which would be like a bimodal distribution here. But instead what we have is not bots, but people that, it's like they're a bot half the time, and then half the time they're doing it right. So that's the challenge. I mean, there's no like bot threshold where you can boot people. So ethical issues. I was debating whether or not to put this in, but I think it's a really interesting thing to think about, right? I mean, like somebody was telling me in like the 1800s they had the factories would send people home, like make as many of these, sew a bunch of this stuff, and then come back and we'll pay you on a per task basis, and that sort of allowed them to ignore the fact that they were forcing people to work like 16 hours a day just to make ends meet, right? And so, we have minimum wage laws, and a lot of people support like a living wage, and this is clearly not a living wage, right? I mean, Mechanical Turk and other labor forces, and there's clearly an interesting ethical issue, and this is actually a friend of mine made this site called Turkopticon, right? And so you can actually go to turkopticon.com, and you can see that they have a lot of anti kind of crowdsourced work rhetoric here. They say we're watching out for the crowd in crowdsourcing because no one else seems to be, right? And there's something really creepy too about these. You have like a remote person call, right? So you're like getting something done, and you don't ever have to meet that person. You don't have to even look at them, right? I mean, they're just like they're literally a number to you, right? And we measure them all in this totally automated way, and so these guys made a system where the workers can actually work together to find out who's a good requester and who's a bad requester, right? So you can install a Firefox plugin that they have, and then you can report someone as, they rejected my work unreasonably, or this work takes too long, or these people didn't pay me promptly enough. And so this actually, I mean, I support this because this gives more transparency into this marketplace, right? So, I think we're an honest requester, so I like the fact that they stop people from doing dishonest stuff and not paying when they said they would. But I think it was, so these guys had this sense that this is like, sub-minimum wage work, and these workers are really unhappy. But then they actually took a survey of with a couple questions, right? So how promptly has a requester paid you? So you probably can't read this, but the top is like very good, and the bottom is very bad. And the questions are how promptly did a requester pay you? How well has the requester paid you for the amount of time it took? And then how fair has the requester been about paying you versus not paying you? And you can see that people generally seem pretty happy with the results. And there's actually a pretty rich channel of communication between the people requesting this kind of work and the people doing this kind of work. And there seems to be this sense of like we're all in it together, which you might not expect from this workforce where the people are numbers and you have the right to pay anyone or not pay anyone without recourse. Wow, so I finished way early because I was worried that I would take forever. I'm sorry. Yeah, any questions? I have backup slides if we could go into if you want.
Do you have a reason or why people should be relatively satisfied even when they
I think the thing that people don't realize from the outside for this kind of workforce is that people are doing it for a lot of different reasons. So I had that slide where it's like fun versus not fun, and actually the fun versus not fun mattered more than the high pay versus low pay, which is pretty interesting. We even found, so I was telling people that we had we were working with a Sunlight Foundation, which is a nonprofit that wanted to put increase government transparency. We had this really boring task where it was like looking through campaign flyers and transcribing the information from the flyer. And no one would do it because it was such a boring, arduous task, right? But then when we put up a note saying, hey, we're doing this for the Sunlight Foundation, and we do it so that they can have greater government transparency, we found that people did the task much, much faster. In fact, it went from like impossible to get people to do it to easy to get people to do it. So I think there's like a complicated range of motives going on here. Sure.
Obviously, the people that do this have some kind of motivation that is, like you said, either fun or they're bored. So it's not a representative crowd. So you cannot ask statistically a question, for example, about the economy or business or lifestyle to depict how the culture or the society is going to interact.
Right.
Is there a way to actually get to the people, to random sample of in a country or in California or something like that?
I mean, I think there's no way. Random sample is a complicated thing to define, right?
Some kind of sample that would be meaningful for statisticians.
So there's a lot of work at the Berkman Institute trying to get good survey data out of these kinds of approaches. We stay away from surveys for that very reason. There are companies that they crowdsource surveys. And actually, if you dig into what market research companies do to create panels of people to make business decisions, it's not that different than what's happening here. I mean, the first obvious thing to do is stratified sampling, right? Where you say, okay, there's half as many Asian people on the service, so we're going to double the weight of Asian people, right? There's half as many, you control for the different demographic factors. But again, we don't do surveys because I don't think it's a representative sample. And I would look at the work coming out of the Berkman Institute right now to sort of see what they're doing.
An iPhone app?
Yeah, well, so actually we're waiting for the App Store to approve it. Yeah. But we're really excited about it. Actually, the iPhone app is paired with the Samasource. So I really love the Samasource workforce, the way they get refugees to do these tasks. But we found that it's hard to put tasks, to give tasks just to refugees without at least a few people in the US kind of watching it to make sure cultural issues aren't causing kind of a train wreck of data coming back. So we're going to use the iPhone app just for tasks that go out to refugees, and we're going to pair people, right? So you'll do it while you're like waiting for the bus, label a few sentiment, and then we can actually use that to train up people in the refugee camps. So I'm actually really excited for the app to come out. Yeah.
So it looks like it's basically tedious stuff that people don't want to do, but others could do and just need half a brain to do it. Or is there any kind of intellectual work that can be done here?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say the other thing, I would not quite say it's, so I think when you look at the different, so I do this work all the time to test our system, right? And I think for a lot of it, it's tedious if you had to do it for more than 10 minutes, but it's kind of fun for small amounts of time. So like labeling sentiment of tweets, I think, is like one of those things where it's like, after 5 minutes, you want to like gouge out your eyes, right? But for that small amount of time, it's sort of interesting to see what people are saying. We sort of focus on really large-scale tasks, which tend to be repetitive. But some of the more kind of interesting, engaging ones that we've done, we had a task where people were checking on road quality. So we had locations all around the country where you'd have to drive out to that road and look and see how well the road was doing there, and people loved that task. I mean, we paid we paid like $5 per check, and you actually have to get away from, go to your car, right? Like drive there, find it, take a picture, and then come back and upload it. But that was a really popular task. Sure.
Can you talk about the distribution of people working for real money versus people working for virtual currency?
Yeah. So the people working for virtual currency we tap in through a different channel than Mechanical Turk. So we find there's more people that are willing to work for virtual currency, but they're a little bit harder to use. It's harder to get them to do more involved tasks. So I don't know. I mean, clearly there's far, far more people on Facebook games that are willing to do small amounts of stuff for virtual currency than there are people on Mechanical Turk willing to work for tasks. On the other hand, Mechanical Turk has much more longevity of a user, right? So people on Turk will stay there for a lot longer doing the task. The question I thought you'd ask was the distribution of people who do it for fun versus money on Mechanical Turk, which is something that's also been studied. So again, I think this guy, Panos, I'm not sure how to say his last name, but he's an NYU professor, is really the expert on that kind of work. Sure.
What I wanted to ask you was that you showed a slide with all the distribution of the workforce, and 80% of them were from the United States. And there are countries like India and China which are very much more populous. So you would expect that there would be more workers from countries like these because there are more people there.
Yeah.
So why is it that this difference comes in?
So it's actually an artifact. So this is just Mechanical Turker location. So it's actually, surprisingly, there's more people in India, for example, that will work for virtual currency than real currency. But that's not, I mean, that's an artifact of how this stuff works. So Mechanical Turk today will only pay you if you have a US bank account. And so that distorts the people that do it. So actually, or you can get a US bank account or you can like get books, right? Or Amazon stuff. So that's why you have such a high United States. In fact, the people that aren't in the United States have some connection to the United States.
Nonprofit that wants to get the work done but doesn't have the money to pay for it. Is there a way for them to just ask flat out for volunteers and say, we're not going to pay you any money, we just want you to do this because it's good?
Yeah, I mean, so there's actually, you know, we don't take that kind of work. But there is a really, really interesting iPhone app called The Incredibles, where they have people on their iPhone doing this kind of crowdsourced like work for free, but it's very clear about you know, this task is going to help like the Smithsonian categorize its content, or this is like research that helps like some, you know, public health NGO. So I don't know if you have something specifically in mind, but I can put you in touch with the, when we get requests like that, I usually send it to the Incredibles guys. I should also mention, I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in the kind of like third world NGO space. There's a guy at MIT who has a nonprofit called TXT Eagle, and they actually take these simple tasks and they send it to people's cell phones in Africa, and they have people actually text back the information. So that, I mean, they're saying, you know, hey, this is like a way to employ like billions of people. But I don't know how much work will actually fit into that model of something you can send in a text and then get the result back in a text. Sure.
You sort of touched on it under your ethical categorization, but maybe a sort of a little more objective point of view is looking at some of the aspects that you talked about from sort of a parity situation, like quality, of course, is, well, quality of the other half of the transaction. And also, jumping back to the first slide, you have a lot of zeros on this money that's being transferred here. And, you know, there's questions of what's the tax situation on that? You know, what labor laws is all of this being governed by? You know, there's now more than a century worth of protection that's being built into basic transactions have been verified, like child labor laws. You know, how do you think this plays in when this could just be a massive hole, if it catches on for the right kind of task, a real good hole to escape all that stuff for the labor, quote, suppliers?
Yeah, I mean, I think the government's going to notice, though. Right, so I think what's happened is, yeah. I mean, you know, I'm not an expert on that, so I'm not super qualified to answer these questions. Again, I think I would refer you to like Berkman Institute for some of the work they've done in that direction. But the one thing to notice, I mean, all these things have one thing in common, which is that they do a contractor-based relationship, and they make most of these workforces actually make you responsible for filling out the 1099s. If you use Mechanical Turk, you actually are responsible. If somebody makes more than $600 a year for you, you have to fill out your own 1099 form. And I think a lot of people don't do it. And I think over the next couple of years, the government will notice that. Sure.
The question there is, that's based on 90% or whatever, it's 8% U.S. workforce. Now it's international. Which government?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I have no idea.
I didn't quite understand why you don't do surveys, because it seems like this would be a perfect model to do something like an opinion engine or a recommendation engine, where instead of tasks that are taking pictures, you could send out take a survey of people who have used certain products and get their opinions and rate things.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it's not a good use. I mean, I'll tell you, some of the stuff that we do a lot of is, for example, measuring the quality of search results. So search companies, like Google, employs thousands of contractors in the United States that just look through results and they say, oh, this is a good result for a query, this is a bad result for a query. And we do a lot of that, where you have a lot of work that anyone can kind of come in and grab. I think that things that fit this model well is where you have a lot of small tasks, but you can do as many of them as you want. If you just have, like, a survey is sort of like one task that you want lots and lots of people to do, and you're paying them, which I think is like distorting the results. And it's like you're only getting, I think there's incentive for people to lie about their demographics so that they can take the survey, and it's hard to drill down and get it right. I mean, I've seen there's a lot of designers I've noticed recently have started to test designs on Mechanical Turk just to get like a feel for, like, do you like this design better or this design better? And I think it's a really good use. For our business, it doesn't make sense, but I think I would recommend trying it. Sure. And you?
So I think this would only work for a certain subset of tasks, like maybe classification tasks, but have you thought about using ensemble methods to improve your results?
Yeah, we sort of do use ensemble. I mean, in some sense we have an ensemble method, but all the classifiers are humans, right? And so we've actually thought of, I would personally love to have one of the classifiers be automated, right? So imagine there's like 5 votes from people, right? And 1 vote from like an AI system, right? And you combine that into like what you think the best answer is. Some of our smartest customers do this tight integration with us where it's essentially active learning, right? So they're taking only the answers where their AI system is most confused and then sending it through us. And then we take like that 10% and label them. And then the active learning literature says that those are actually the best results to feed back into your AI and improve it. And so eventually they'll make us obsolete in theory, right? But I think it'll be a while. Sure.
This might sound trite. Don't want anyone to laugh, but with the U.S. unemployment rate hovering near 10%, do you actually think that that's something that people should take up if they have no money coming in? Possible to generate real money working 20 hours a week, 40 hours? Do you think it's going to be fed by trends like this?
It's an interesting question. I mean, I think that this helps. It's a tough question, right? So I think Mechanical Turk is actually the worst example of this, in that it has the lowest average hourly rate and sort of the most repetitive tasks. And I think that it's tough to make real money on it, although there are certain tasks that you can do that make significant amounts of money, like the checking the roads task paid a fair amount of money. I think live work is, so where's that slide of, so you can see mechanical work is like, Mechanical Turk is actually the furthest over on the left of all these places that you can go to do crowdsourced work, but it's also kind of the most well-known of the genre. So I might encourage people to check out live work, or live ops is something a little bit, it takes a little bit longer and there's a little bit more of a barrier to entry, but once you get in, you can be making a higher salary.
You're talking like higher, like $2 an hour?
Well, I'm saying,
if realistically, you're talking people in the U.S., they're clearly doing this for fun for $1 an hour. Like, is there actually money to be made?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so
live get up to minimum wage.
Live ops is past minimum wage. Yeah, I mean, so you can see, seriously, Mechanical Turk is like the furthest on the left of like all these different like sites that you can go to make money. But I mean, the thing is, right, if you look online, I mean, if you ever get those ads that's like make money now online, I mean, they're total scams. I saw a study that 98% of them are scams. I mean, it's outrageous, right? And all these sites are real places where somebody is deriving real economic value, so they really will pay you at least something. It's not a scam, right? So it's definitely a tricky issue. All right, we end early? Oh, sorry.
Oh, just a couple quick things. So if this were available in China, if you could have a Chinese bank account, I mean, there's places where the minimum wage is much lower. I'm thinking about like micro loans. Has there been any thought of like, are there countries where if you don't mind the demographics being skewed out, this could actually be, more economically feasible for more people, even at the Mechanical Turk level of pay.
Yeah, I mean, so, again, like Somasource, it's like, that $1 an hour is actually incredible to that community, right? I mean, like, people are making $0 an hour, and all microloans can do is redistribute the existing money more efficiently, right? This is actually injecting money into the community, and it's teaching people computer skills, which, you get better and better at computer, and then you can do more and more. You can sort of like move up the chain of this into more bigger, higher paying tasks. So yeah, I think it's a, sorry.
Now, where do you think this is going? I'll ask the future question.
So like I said, I mean, I think that you'll see, I think that people empirically prefer this mode of work where they're paid on a per task basis and they can do it from the privacy of their home, and they can grab a task without the overhead of like a boss or like someone, committing to doing months of work. So I think that and then I think on the work requester side, you're also limiting overhead, right? Of having to interview a whole bunch of people and decide, who I'm going to hire, then fire them, and hire another guy if it's not working out. So I think these sort of automated work methods will certainly take off, right? I mean, I think there's a problem of like routing your, it's like you probably have things that you want to outsource right now, right, in your life, right? And then there's probably people out there that want to do them right now, right? But it's too hard to find that person. It's too hard to like define exactly what you want. It's too hard to be sure that they're actually going to do the thing that you want. So I think all those kinds of small things that people don't outsource today are going to get outsourced through stuff like this. And I think you can see that trend happening already.
Have you done anything in the way of, clearly you've got that many companies, you could call it a small industry. Mm-hmm. Where's the industry going?
That's a hard question. I think you'll see verticals, right? You'll see people that just do, I mean, you're sort of seeing it segment, right? So you're seeing like transcription companies. There's a company, Casting Words, that does just transcription in this way. It's really interesting. I mean, the Wall Street Journal did this survey of like, they tried a whole bunch of different services, and all of them were the same, right? They all outsourced to India, except for Casting Words, which used a crowdsourced backend. And Wall Street Journal didn't know this, right? I mean, they just tried all the different ones, and they wrote this report saying, man, Casting Words is so much better than the rest of these transcription services. And it's because they used this. I mean, the real story was that they're using this different crowdsourced model.
Works or words?
What's that? Casting Words.
Words.
Yeah, Casting Words. And I'm sure you guys have, so, stop using grad students for your transcription. I did that when or undergrads, probably, right?
No, actually, I did employ a Stanford undergraduate.
Yeah, it's probably me.
Undergraduate research program for a quarter. Clearly, this hadn't been in existence, I would have used it.
I better leave.
Sure. Go ahead, trying to understand where the obvious point is contextless connection. Mm-hmm. So take it one extreme, where you sit for 20 years. Mm-hmm. And the other extreme, somebody who's never heard of you and never will again.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Where is there any way of pushing it up the spectrum towards things that do?
Yeah, I mean, again, so I'm really emphasizing the new thing here, which is Mechanical Turk and the stuff way over to the left. And I think like as soon as you start to move at all to the right on this chart here, you start to see things with more and more context, right? Like, I mean, something like Elance, it's like I don't meet you, but I see a picture of you, and it even like lists your hobbies, and we have this relationship that we work on. So I think the general trend is moving away from all that context in terms of work, like hiring people where I do less of an interview and get to know them less. But I think there's certainly lots of tasks, right? Like there's lots of companies that offer virtual assistants, and you do develop a pretty tight relationship with them, as you'd have to, right, to explain what you want. Yeah.
I was curious if you've seen any examples where instead of company to company, you have like a big organization who's using these kind of things, breaking it up within their own organization, out of job thing or anything, like along those lines.
So you mean like a company sort of organizes its own people with these methods?
Like Department of Energy, massive, but using the same jobs as random, not tied to the job.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting question. I mean, so I've been surprised that customers will often use our system to which manages the quality on these different labor pools, they'll actually use their own workers and use the same system to manage the quality of their own people doing it, which is often like the boss. It's like, like I remember like when I was working as an RA here, we'd have to all like label data together, right? Like everyone would get a chunk, including the prof, and like, we'd all sit there and like label some. And this kind of system can manage the quality of that really easily, right? It can add in just the right level of redundancy and make sure people are. So yes, we do see that.
The software questions, then, are there some, what is the advantage of having the software manages and invites and does it all automatically? What else? I mean, that's probably fairly standard now. What else are some of the advantages for?
So the big advantage is managing the quality, right? And that's really the huge advantage is like, figuring out that guy that's like, didn't read the instructions, and is messing up, right? And then it can also estimate, based on the agreement level, it can estimate what's the accuracy of this data coming back. Right? I mean, I've looked at like, stuff like, famous data sets that everybody uses, right? And we all find the errors in it. It drives you crazy, right? So at least having a handle on what's the inter-annotated agreement here and doing it in a smart way where you're not just throwing 5 people at every question. You're like putting the people on the ones where it seems more difficult and more interesting, and then escalating that is not trivial. And then also, when you have this many people doing your tasks all at once, it's kind of tricky because you don't know, with a web interface, you don't know if somebody's actually going to finish the job, right? So one thing I point out is like, look out here on the right side. The task took an extra minute or two because people were just holding on to tasks that they had loaded, but the system couldn't know if they were going to finish the task or not. So it sort of had to like go out and ask one last guy to just like, okay, finish this job. Let's give it back to the customer. Does that make sense? So see these 2 guys that like kind of stick out towards the end? So kind of like how airplanes will overbook a little bit, it has to sort of oversubscribe the task. So I think the routing by itself isn't trivial, then the quality is the really tricky part.
And you're trying to automate all of that.
Yeah.
You're not farming that out.
No, that's a funny idea. Sure.
What does the Venn diagram look like for people that use Mechanical Turk, that do the work, people that are employers, and people that are both?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. I think there's not a big overlap except people that request wanting to test the work that goes up. Yeah. Mechanical Turk is very unique in that it has the same interface for the people doing the work and the people requesting the work. Most of the companies on that list have a very different path.
How big of a cut does Amazon take?
So 10% or half a cent, whichever is greater. Oh, sorry, go.
Sort of extrapolating a little bit, kind of down the negative route. What sort of opportunities are there for mob sourcing in a sense? Imagine, well, we want to keep suspicious people out of the football stadium. So of course we take their mob. They're suspicious. They
look suspicious.
should we strip search them?
It's an interesting question. Yeah, I mean, certainly that's a thing that.
That's pretty much feasible.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's in a friendlier thing. We worked with a dating site to check how attractive people were, so they could be paired with people of similar level of attractiveness. I mean.
That's the sugar-coated version.
Yeah, the sugar-coated version, exactly. Yeah.
So I was just wondering, so you were mentioning that the very simple tasks get boring and cease to be fun after a while. I think there's also a lot of evidence that like kind of assembly lines that the quality of work sort of declines as you. I was wondering, I don't know how the economics work for this, but of taking a variety of different tasks that are each like 5 to 2 minutes and sort of like switching among them, to keep people kind of engaged for longer periods and. Look into that.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we do, right? I mean, so that's why we have, that's why I think it's important. And I think that's why you'll see like in this industry, verticals popping up that do specific applications. But I think there'll always be room for a site that aggregates all these and shows different tasks to the same workforce, because it's people like, the same person that wants to do one thing is often going to be interested in doing another thing. I think you're right, like popping them up and just showing them immediately is important to keep engagement. Actually, one of the first examples of this this kind of approach is Hot or Not used their users to crowdsource flagging things as porn or not porn, and talk about. I mean, they did a lot of research on like just showing somebody like having somebody as soon as they've like labeled one thing, like labeling the next thing right away really increased people's engagement. Yeah.
A couple of years ago, there was a talk by a person here in Berkeley. They had a camera that the crowd, the people on the internet were controlling the camera. And again, it was a crowdsourcing where the camera would look at. I'm interested in kind of putting the crowd almost against each other. Like you set a game of chess or checker and two group of people, and the same person can play both sides, but because it's a crowd, it's in. If you ever tried an experiment like this.
Well, do you remember when they had the Kasparov versus the World? Yeah. I mean, so they had like I think grandmasters would pick like 3 moves, and they would each sort of like tell a story of why like this move is the best, and then the crowd would vote on which of the 3 to do. And I thought, I was thinking about that, and I was thinking at the time I thought the crowd would probably win, but I think Kasparov won, right? So that's a knock against the crowd for this kind of.
Okay, one more.
All right, yeah, sorry. In the back?
I just want to come back to your pricing system, or well, not come back to it, discuss it a little. How do you assign a value to a task? I mean, does it change over time if you don't get enough responses? And have you ever been in a position where it's like, oh man, we're getting killed here on salary, because that we're getting for this project?
Yeah, I mean, so all these places, all these task-based places are based, all these task-based marketplaces are really true marketplaces. And in fact, we have a lot of data that I think some economics professor would love to have. And if you know someone that wants it, we're interested in collaborating with someone. But we do fluctuate the price to find the point where we can get people to do the task for the cheapest. And you should too if you use any of these.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
For more, please visit us at stanford.edu.